It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon at my lake cabin, a rare escape from the constant battles with the homeowners association. I had invited a special guest, the U.S. District Judge overseeing the very lawsuits tied to the HOA's abuse of power. Just as we sat down to discuss evidence of fines, harassment, and community mismanagement, the door flew open. In stormed her, the self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, or as most neighbors knew her, HOA Karen. With finger-pointing and a voice that rattled the rafters, she launched into accusations that my cabin paint color was non-compliant, my dock illegal, and even my dog too loud. What she didn't realize was that she wasn't just yelling at me. She was yelling at the federal judge reviewing her HOA's misconduct. The judge calmly stood, letting her rant echo until she finally took a breath. Then, with the gravitas only a federal judge could muster, he told her, "Ma'am, this is exactly why we're here." The room fell silent, and for the first time, the power dynamic shifted, not in favor of the HOA, but in favor of justice. The power of standing up to abuse within a homeowners association is one of the most important lessons that can be drawn from the story of HOA Karen barging into the lake cabin. At its core, the issue is not just about one difficult person or even one difficult board. It's about how structures of authority, when left unchecked, can be misused to intimidate, harass, and silence people who have every right to enjoy their homes and communities. A homeowners association is supposed to be a body that helps neighbors collectively care for shared spaces, preserve property values, and manage amenities. The purpose is cooperation and stewardship. But too often, HOAs attract individuals who see their role not as service, but as power, and that power becomes a weapon. When abuse arises, it may not look extreme at first. It can start with unreasonable fines over minor infractions, like the shade of paint chosen for a door, or a complaint about a child's bicycle left in a driveway. On the surface, these seem like trivial matters, yet they often become the opening act for a larger pattern of control. Over time, homeowners find themselves buried under constant notices, threatened with liens, and left feeling like their neighborhood has turned into a hostile environment. The intimidation works because many people assume that the HOA has unlimited authority, or they fear that fighting back will cost too much time, money, or peace of mind. It becomes easier to pay the fine, repaint the wall, or comply with rules they know are unreasonable. This is precisely how abuse sustains itself, through silence and surrender. Standing up to abuse, however, changes the entire equation. It does not mean being combative for its own sake, nor does it mean breaking rules out of spite. It means learning what your actual rights are under state law, reading the association's governing documents, and being willing to challenge decisions that fall outside the scope of legitimate authority. Many homeowners are surprised to discover that HOAs are not all powerful. They must comply with higher laws, they must act in good faith, and they can be held accountable in court if they abuse their authority. Knowledge is the first shield against abuse, because once a homeowner understands that the HOA board is not above the law, the intimidation begins to lose its force. Equally important is the principle that standing up is not only about the individual, but about the community as a whole. When one person resists abuse, it sends a signal to others who may have been suffering in silence. Neighbors who felt isolated suddenly see that they are not alone. Abuse thrives in the dark, and the courage of a single homeowner can shed light on patterns of misconduct that everyone has been experiencing. This is why HOA Karen's intrusion into the lake cabin was so telling. Her behavior in that moment reflected the very dynamic that others had endured privately. By standing firm, the homeowner and the judge both highlighted that such behavior was not only unacceptable, but also actionable.
The educational takeaway is that standing up to abuse requires preparation, persistence, and sometimes outside support, but it is always worth it. Abuse does not end by hoping it will stop on its own. It ends when people are willing to say no, to document incidents, to seek allies, and, if necessary, to bring the matter before a neutral authority like a court. The courage to act transforms the situation from one where power is concentrated in the hands of a few into one where fairness and accountability can prevail. What seems like an overwhelming battle at the beginning often turns into a turning point for the entire community once someone decides enough is enough. In short, the power of standing up to abuse within an HOA is not just about pushing back against one person's overreach. It is about restoring balance, protecting individual rights, and reminding everyone that authority exists to serve the community, not dominate it. It is a lesson in courage, citizenship, and the resilience of people who refuse to let intimidation define the place they call home.
The importance of timing and truth in situations involving authority, conflict, and accountability cannot be overstated. In the story of HOA Karen storming into the lake cabin during a meeting with the U.S. District Judge, timing and truth collided in a way that revealed more than any prepared testimony or document ever could. The act of barging in was not just a moment of rudeness or poor judgment. It was an unfiltered display of behavior that validated the very concerns being raised about the HOA. This illustrates how in life, people often expose their true nature when they believe they're in control or when they act without considering the moment. For those who are watching carefully, truth has a way of surfacing precisely when it is needed. Timing matters because it shapes perception. Imagine if the homeowner had simply told the judge stories of harassment or power trips without any direct evidence. The judge might have listened, taken notes, and waited for documentation to support the claims. But when the individual at the center of the complaints burst into the meeting uninvited, speaking with hostility and issuing accusations, the timing could not have been more revealing. It turned the abstract into something tangible. Instead of allegations on paper, the judge witnessed the conduct firsthand. That one moment carried more weight than months of written complaints. This demonstrates how timing can amplify truth, giving it the power to cut through doubt and make its impact undeniable. Truth, when paired with timing, often reveals itself not through careful planning, but through authenticity. In conflicts with HOAs or other authorities, homeowners are frequently told to keep their heads down, to avoid making noise, and to let the system play out quietly. Yet when truth emerges naturally, through an outburst, an overreach, or an action taken at exactly the wrong moment for the abuser, it carries a credibility that no polished speech could achieve. This is not about seeking conflict or hoping for confrontation, but about understanding that those who misuse authority often reveal themselves without realizing it. All it takes is the right moment for others to see what has been hidden. This principle extends far beyond the world of HOAs. In workplaces, families, or communities, the truth about unfair treatment, bullying, or misconduct often comes to light not because someone planned it, but because timing exposed it. The manager who preaches fairness may slip into favoritism when they think no one is watching. The neighbor who insists on strict rules may ignore those rules for themselves, revealing hypocrisy at a critical moment. These lapses, when they occur in the presence of the right witnesses, become undeniable evidence. It is why timing and truth are often more powerful than carefully rehearsed arguments. There is also an educational element in recognizing the role of patience. Many people, when facing unfair treatment, feel compelled to force the truth into the open immediately. They grow frustrated when others cannot see what they're experiencing. But forcing the issue rarely works as well as letting time reveal patterns. Abusive behavior is difficult to hide consistently. Eventually, the timing aligns and truth is laid bare in ways that cannot be dismissed. In the story of the cabin, if the judge had left 5 minutes earlier, the intrusion might never have been witnessed, and the HOA's behavior would have remained in dispute. Because the timing aligned, however, the truth became undeniable in a single, powerful scene. The lesson here is twofold. First, truth is strongest when it reveals itself naturally. And second, timing often determines how truth is received. Being prepared, patient, and observant increases the chances that when the truth does emerge, it will do so in a way that makes its impact meaningful. Homeowners, employees, or anyone dealing with authority figures must recognize that silence does not mean absence of evidence. It often means waiting for the right moment when misconduct shows itself. In essence, the combination of timing and truth creates a kind of justice that is both practical and profound. It shows that while people may manipulate rules, twist narratives, or try to control perception, the reality of who they are eventually comes through. When it does, and when the moment is right, the truth becomes more powerful than any excuse or explanation. The cabin incident serves as a reminder that sometimes the most important evidence is not in documents or testimony, but in actions that speak louder than words, arriving at the exact moment they need to be seen.
The role of the law in everyday lives is often underestimated until people find themselves facing situations where fairness and accountability matter more than convenience. Many individuals assume that the legal system is only for dramatic criminal trials or massive corporate disputes, but in reality, it reaches deeply into the daily lives of ordinary citizens. When a homeowners association oversteps its authority, when a neighbor harasses another, or when a local government enforces an unjust ordinance, the law becomes the tool by which ordinary people can seek protection and balance. The story of the judge witnessing HOA Karen's behavior in the cabin underscores this point powerfully. The law is not a distant concept. It is the framework that ensures communities function with justice rather than intimidation. One of the educational lessons here is that the law is designed not only to punish wrongdoing, but to establish boundaries and prevent abuses of power. HOAs, for example, are granted authority through state statutes and community covenants. However, that authority is not unlimited. They are required to act reasonably, fairly, and within the scope of their governing documents. When they issue fines or attempt to dictate behavior that falls outside their legitimate scope, they are crossing into territory where the law can intervene. Most homeowners do not realize that courts can invalidate abusive HOA practices, require boards to act transparently, and even hold board members personally accountable in extreme cases. By understanding this, people can shift from feeling powerless under an HOA's authority to recognizing that the law is a tool that protects them. This is why access to legal remedies is so vital. It levels the playing field between ordinary people and organizations that may seem larger, more organized, or more intimidating. Without the law, power would always rest with those who are loudest, most aggressive, or most willing to manipulate rules to their advantage. The presence of the judge in the story was symbolic of how law functions. It takes the chaotic energy of human conflict and channels it into a process where evidence, fairness, and accountability matter more than bluster or intimidation. The moment HOA Karen stormed in and revealed her combative nature, the judge's reaction showed that the law is not blind to behavior. It interprets actions in light of justice, not dominance. Another critical educational element is that the law is not passive. It responds to those who invoke it. Many people suffer through unfairness simply because they never take the step to document it, report it, or bring it to the attention of the proper authority. In conflicts with HOAs, this might mean keeping copies of every notice, recording board meetings, or collecting testimony from neighbors who have faced similar treatment. These seemingly small actions transform grievances into evidence. The legal system does not operate on feelings or frustrations. It operates on facts. The sooner people understand this, the more effectively they can use the law to protect themselves. The role of the law also extends beyond the resolution of individual disputes. It serves as a deterrent. When organizations or individuals know that their actions can and will be challenged legally, they are less likely to abuse their authority. For instance, if an HOA board has faced a lawsuit that forced it to reimburse unjust fines or change its governing practices, the ripple effect influences how future boards operate. The law creates a precedent that prevents repeated abuses, thereby improving the environment for the entire community. This is one of the greatest strengths of legal systems. They are not just about punishing one wrong, but about shaping behavior for the future. Ultimately, the story of the judge and HOA Karen demonstrates that the law is inseparable from daily life. Every homeowner, tenant, employee, or citizen operates within its framework, whether they realize it or not. While it may feel intimidating to invoke the law, doing so is often the only way to ensure fairness when authority is misused. The presence of the judge turned what could have been another episode of harassment into a moment of clarity. It showed that when ordinary people choose to bring their struggles into the light of the legal system, they gain access to a structure that is larger, stronger, and fairer than any single person or board. The larger takeaway is that law is not something distant or abstract. It is the everyday guardian of fairness. It protects property rights, ensures contracts are honored, prevents harassment, and provides recourse when power is abused. Knowing this empowers individuals to stop seeing themselves as victims of circumstance and start recognizing that they have a pathway to justice. The story illustrates that the law's role is not reserved for others, it belongs to everyone, and it exists to ensure that justice can prevail, even in the most ordinary of places, like a lake cabin on a quiet afternoon.
Community over control is an idea that sits at the very heart of why neighborhoods form and why people choose to live in shared spaces. At its best, a community is meant to be a place of mutual support, respect, and cooperation. It is where people know their neighbors, look out for one another, and create an environment where everyone feels safe and valued. Control, on the other hand, is about dominance and enforcing conformity for its own sake. The tension between these two approaches often determines whether a neighborhood thrives or becomes a battleground. The story of HOA Karen storming into the lake cabin illustrates how quickly control can undermine the very spirit of community that a homeowners association is supposed to protect. Homeowners associations were originally created to maintain shared spaces, preserve property values, and provide a framework for collective decision-making. In theory, they represent community at its best. People pooling resources to maintain common areas like parks, lakes, or swimming pools, and agreeing on reasonable standards so that everyone benefits from a well-kept neighborhood. When they operate with transparency, fairness, and a focus on shared well-being, HOAs can indeed strengthen bonds among neighbors. They can create events that bring people together, fund improvements that make everyone proud of their neighborhood, and resolve conflicts in ways that are balanced and respectful. In this sense, they embody community. The problem arises when the focus shifts from serving the community to exerting control. Instead of being a collective body, the HOA can turn into a hierarchy dominated by individuals who see themselves as enforcers rather than facilitators. Rules that were meant to protect property values or keep harmony begin to be used as weapons. A lawn that is 2 inches too high becomes a violation. A fence painted in the wrong shade becomes grounds for fines. A child's toy left in the yard becomes an act of rebellion. What is lost in this environment is the very spirit of neighborliness. People start to fear their neighbors rather than enjoy them. Conversations that could have been resolved with a simple knock on the door and a smile are instead escalated into confrontations and penalties. The educational takeaway is that community thrives on respect, while control thrives on fear. When an HOA or any governing body focuses on control, it creates division. Neighbors no longer see one another as allies in creating a better place to live. Instead, they see one another as potential rule breakers or enforcers. Trust erodes, and the sense of belonging that should define a neighborhood disappears. On the other hand, when the focus remains on community, respect becomes the guiding principle. Instead of issuing fines for every minor infraction, leaders seek solutions that build understanding. Instead of using rules as rigid tools of enforcement, they apply them with reason and flexibility. The lake cabin incident illustrates this contrast perfectly. HOA Karen stormed in not to build community, but to assert control. Her outburst was not about improving the neighborhood, but about establishing dominance. The irony is that in doing so, she demonstrated the very failure of control-based leadership. It isolates, divides, and eventually backfires. In contrast, the calm presence of the judge represented the community-centered approach of the law, fair, balanced, and protective of everyone's rights. The difference between the two approaches was stark, and it highlighted the choice every neighborhood faces. Communities that choose respect over control benefit in countless ways. They become places where people feel free to personalize their homes, where differences are tolerated, and where disputes are resolved with dialogue rather than hostility. These communities are also more resilient because people who feel respected are more willing to cooperate and invest in the neighborhood. They host gatherings, help one another during hardships, and celebrate shared successes. The rules still exist, but they serve the people rather than ruling over them. In the end, the lesson is clear. True strength in any neighborhood comes from community, not control. Control may bring temporary compliance, but it breeds resentment and resistance. Community, grounded in respect, brings cooperation and lasting harmony. For homeowners, understanding this difference is vital. It is not enough to comply with rules. It is important to demand that those rules reflect fairness and serve the collective good. The story of the cabin serves as a reminder that when control overshadows community, everyone loses. But when community takes priority, everyone gains.